It is now time for today's invited talk, and I have the pleasure to welcome here at Interact 2025, Jussara Almeida. Jussara is a full professor at the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, where she currently leads the Social Computing Laboratory at the Department of Computer Science. She holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and is a former affiliate member of the Brazilian Academy of Sciences. Her main research interests are social computing, user behavior analysis, as well as performance analysis of modeling of large-scale distributed systems. The title of her talk is Drivers and Dangers of Information Spread in Social Media, Curiosity, Coordination, and Children's Exposure to Inappropriate Content. Thank you, Jussara.
So hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank the organization for inviting me to give this talk, for the opportunity to talk about a bit of my research to this community. As said, it's about information spread in social media. But before I talk about this research, I want to give you a picture of me as a researcher, because it might be different from some of you. My background is on performance modeling, and at some point I realized that to understand performance of systems, you have to understand how users behave in the sense of the load that the user imposes on the system. And at the same time, the system design, the system performance dictates how the user behaves or influence how the user behaves as well. So I started looking into user behavior. And with the emergence of social media, this became like central stage. And that's my research agenda currently, which is focused on user characterization, user behavior characterization from a quantitative perspective, always thinking of the system, but increasingly interested in trying to understand behavior patterns from data, okay? And today, I'm gonna talk about information dissemination in social media. I'll start talking about drivers, and at some point, you notice that the topic will be a little bit darker, so I start talking about dangers, and I'll finish with some dangers in the particular context of children. So the driving question here is, how does a particular piece of content achieve large scale of dissemination? And the assumption behind what I'm doing is that you need to capture individual and collective behavior patterns that affect or drive how the users consume information and produce information, both ends of the information spread process. So let's focus first on individual behavior. You can analyze individual behavior from different perspectives. You could focus on content properties and how this could match personal interests. How do you make a content, a particular piece of content, very attractive? You could also analyze from the perspective of individual biases that we know all of us as human beings have. There is a whole codex of biases that has been mapped to describe how we make decisions and how we deviate from rational behavior. And there are also personality traits. And one personality trait that I'm going to talk about is curiosity. So how did I hit this topic? This is not something that I used to work on. I hit this topic because I was doing recommendation systems. I was working on recommendation for social media. And in 2016, I saw this paper at CIR where they combined traditional techniques for recommendation that many of us working on the area were doing with a model of curiosity, one particular model called Wounded's curve. Okay? I had never heard about that before. I don't know if you have, but here's my take on it. So Wounded was an experimental psychologist, and he postulated this curve, a inverted U-shaped or a bell-shaped curve, to explain how the stimuli that you receive from the external world causes a pleasure or triggers your curiosity in your brain. The idea is that the brain is running a selection process, and the brain is going to choose. There are so many stimuli out there, everything that you would listen to, me speaking now, everything that you read, everything is a stimulus to your curiosity. And your brain is going to react to the stimulus that cause pleasure. And the idea of wounded is that there is a function that maps stimuli, or the degree of stimulus with the curiosity level, which he called like a hedonic value, a level of pleasure caused in your brain. If you offer too little stimulus, you're just bored. You're not going to trigger your curiosity. If I offer you too much stimulus, it's too heavy, it's too far from your reality, you just become too anxious, and also you're not going to react positively to it. There is actually this middle zone of moderate stimulus that maps into the maximum curiosity zone. Okay? This curve was postulated by Wounded and was validated later in different contexts, architecture, gaming, several different contexts. And I saw that the first time in the context of recommendation function. The idea is that in this paper they propose how to, given the history of items that a particular user assessed, how to infer his wounded curve, because this is something personal. What causes anxiety in me could be pleasure on your brain, and could be boredom in someone else's brain. So the challenge is to infer this curve from data, from your past history. And what this paper did was to propose how to infer that. Great. I thought that was really interesting. This really triggered my curiosity. I was like in the middle zone there. But what they've done is that, well, the literature tells us that this x-axis here, this stimulus, is actually a combination of different factors. And this is really an individual trait. What makes you curious? You could think and ask yourself. Something novel makes me curious. Or something that it's non-trivial, complexity. Or something that it's uncertain, you're not sure about it. Or something that triggers different responses in your brain. You like, you don't like, you agree, you disagree. All of these factors, they refer to as qualitative variables. These are facets of the stimulus. And this paper in 2016, and many of the papers that came afterwards in the context of recommendation, what they did is they used only one or two of these variables. We really were interested in understanding these variables more. And we wanted to propose strategies to quantify conflict, uncertainty, complexity, novelty, as components of curiosity stimulation in different contexts. And we did that for information consumption in the context of Last.fm. Last.fm was very big in the past, but it was a platform where you could listen to songs. So it's an information consumption scenario where you are consuming songs, listening to songs. And also we did later in the context of WhatsApp. And I'll be talking about WhatsApp, Telegram, later on. Every time that I talk about that, I'm talking about public groups, okay? I'm not talking about personal conversations. I'm talking about groups that have their links publicized, and you can join, anyone can join. And we wanted to study, in the case of WhatsApp, social curiosity, which is something that is more recent in the literature. And it relates to social influence, but it's different. Social influence is like you exert influence on someone. Social curiosity is you are influenced by someone, and this triggers your curiosity to do something. And in the case here, to share content, to produce information. And the basic idea is the following. So we know from the literature that curiosity stimulation, or curiosity stimulus, is a combination of different variables: novelty, complexity, conflict, uncertainty, social curiosity. And there are some papers or some studies that explain how, or propose the methodology, better saying, how to quantify these variables using information theory. And we build on this idea. We use this methodology in the literature to first propose metrics of curiosity stimulation for different scenarios. And this is really specific of the scenario because you have to think of what triggers the curiosity of the user in that environment. Once you have metrics, you can compute metrics to assess the drivers of curiosity, the stimuli of curiosity at each user interaction, user event, a listening to a song, a posting of a message in a group. Then we can cluster these events to try to identify profiles, and then you can study how the curiosity of a user evolves over time, because curiosity is not static, or the curiosity stimulation may not be static, may change over time. And just to give you an idea, this is like a trace of an anonymous user, what he consumed on Last.fm. The Last.fm data set is public. There are a couple of data sets that are public. This is one of them. But basically what we have is a trace of everything that the user consumed over time. And we use this history to estimate the metrics for each of those qualitative variables at each event. So when the user was listening to the song, Have a Drink on Me, number 9 here, what's the novelty for him with respect to that song, with respect to that artist, with respect to the genre of this music? What's the complexity? What's the conflict? And that's what he did. And we proposed several metrics, which I'm gonna just flash them here, okay, and skip. There are a bunch of metrics that are based on information theory. Okay, if I go back very quickly, because I don't want any of you in the anxiety section of your curiosity, there are a bunch of logs here because this is information theory, okay? This is surprisal entropy, it's based on that. So what did we do? We start to identifying profiles of curiosity stimulation. So at some moments here, for instance, the C3 down on the right, I have complexity as an important driver of the curiosity, of a stimulus of the curiosity. In other cases, I have the novelty of the artist, and I can quantify that. And I can even analyze how the curiosity of a user evolved over time. This state diagram here is proposed to try to capture these dynamics, okay? Each state here is a profile of curiosity stimulation, and the transitions tells us how the frequency at which from one event to the other one, the user curiosity stimulation change. So what we see here is that most of the times, the curiosity remains pretty much under the same profile, which is true. I mean, it's reasonable. But every now and then it changes, okay? And then we can think of using this to trace the profile of curiosity stimulation of different users. Here are profiles of users, okay? How can we do that? As said, the idea that many followed was to explore this as a component of a recommendation. But we actually tried to do that, but we were more interested in trying to correlate curiosity with information spread. These are 2 papers that came out earlier this year. One relates, in one we studied curiosity as a driving force behind sharing of content on Telegram during the last Brazilian elections. The last Brazilian election is a theme that I'm going to come back to it shortly. And on the right, what we did is we wanted to understand, go beyond politics, and look at groups with different themes. Politics, there are Telegram groups about education. People join to learn about things. There are different types of groups, and we want to understand what kind of curiosity profile drives people to participate in these conversations about politics, about other topics, okay? So again, we developed the metrics for this context, we characterize them, and some of the things, and as I said, the driving question is, how does curiosity stimulation relate to user participation in public Telegram groups with diverse topics? What we found was that for very different profiles, politics, users are mostly driven by uncertainty in the sense that often users talk to many different people using many different types of media in these groups, okay? In these groups. So that leads to uncertainty because there is no clear pattern. In cryptocurrencies, crypto is a big thing on Telegram. Okay? We saw a different pattern. We saw some mixed behavior, but in particular here we saw the importance of social influence as a driving force for me to participate. Meaning that if I see that someone whom I trust, whom influences me, posted, I tend to post as well. And this makes sense in this environment because they are discussing things related to crypto market, and there is some notion of trust building that might be necessary. And then there is a third case, which is linguistics. And here we saw something different, where we had people that they were not necessarily driven by curiosity. There's nothing there is very strong, but they triggered a lot of discussion. They influenced a lot of people. So it would be something like an influencer in Instagram or in Facebook, even though we don't have this notion here on Telegram, because it's a flat space of conversation. There's no hierarchy officially. These are, for instance, in linguistics, we enter and we looked at the message, who were these people? And they are actually like teachers who would start discussion about the topic, and they were very influential, and people would start following the discussion. Okay. And so what did we find? Well, users tend to stick to one profile of curiosity stimulation, meaning this is sort of stable. It changes every now and then, but it's sort of a stable trait, individual trait. The topics matter. We had seen that also in the WhatsApp study. Politics is very different from crypto, very different from linguistics, and we had 10 different topics that we analyzed. And even in the same group at the same time, meaning the same context of what was happening, users may exhibit very different curiosity profiles, which reflect the fact that it's really an individual trait. It's something that, regardless, there is a social aspect, but there is also an individual, very strong individual aspect here. And to try to correlate curiosity with action, action meaning participating, sharing something in the groups, what we did is we correlated user curiosity with engagement. Engagement meaning the number of messages that the user shared. And also with centrality in the network and influenced by network. Centrality is a measure of importance. Someone who is very central in the network, someone who influences many people. We had a measure for that. And I should have a disclaimer here. It's natural to think that in groups where more people talked, each one of the participants tended to talk more. Like if no one talks around you, you're not going to talk. So we had to control for that in the analysis, and we did. But even controlling for that, we found some interesting findings. We found that, in general, there were people who were not driven by any particular profile of stimulation. Okay? We call them independent. There was nothing strong in terms of, at least in terms of the variables that we modeled. But they have high influence. They are very central in the network, meaning that whenever they write something, a bunch of people write afterwards. And usually these people who follow these independent guys, they are those that are more influenced by them. So we call them indirect influence. It's this notion of influencer. That is, there are some key roles in the conversation. Some people triggers the conversation, and there are those who respond to that and follow one. And talk a lot, share a lot, high activity. They share a lot, and they end up influencing many people. Influence, and by influence here, I mean they trigger the curiosity on the others to participate. And the others are usually, many of them are driven by uncertainty, meaning that they talk with many different people. They are not like, they don't remain within a specific circle. And finally, I have those who have very low influence and very low activity. They don't share a lot. And they are driven mostly by novelty and direct influence. So what did we see here? We're talking about Telegram, groups in Telegram where I have a bunch of people. There is no structure, whatsoever. But still, we see some specific roles. We have those who initiate the conversation. We have those that respond to those initiators and keep the conversation going. We have those that respond to those and start talking to many different people. And then there are those that eventually respond and talk. So we see some structure in a space that it's completely unstructured, which I thought it was really interesting. And this leads to another sort of orthogonal, but actually this tells us that it's not completely orthogonal, research line, which is to look not at individual traits, but look at collective behavior, because this is an evidence of some sort of structure, some sort of collective organization. So we also are interested in that. And by collective behavior, I mean the kinds of activities engaged by sizable but loosely organized groups of people. Loosely organized, especially. And our focus here is to study phenomena driven by collective behavior. And the challenge, the technical challenge, is basically to identify the collective behavior. And I'm going to explain why. Okay? So, in social media, if you're talking about collective behavior, possibly you're going to build some sort of network. You are connecting users who interact to disseminate particular pieces of content. You build a network of users, of interacting users. And if you've done that, you probably know that these networks are very, very, very big. And easily, hundreds of thousands of edges, very hard to work and process. But most importantly, the claim that I have is that not all the edges are equally important. These networks are actually full of noise. And by noise, I mean edges that are not important for you. And because they occur in abundance, they may actually hurt the interpretability of whatever you're trying to study. And you need to get rid of them. You need to get rid of this noise. And that's the challenge here. You need to focus on what's called the backbone. The backbone is the subset of edges, interactions, that are really important for you. So let me give you an example, a concrete example, which is the case study that I'm going to talk about. Let's suppose that we're going to analyze coordination in social media, coordination to promote particular pieces of content, campaigns. People getting together to share the same content over and over again. This could be for good, this could be for evil, okay? So what kind of network I would build? One possible network would be to connect users who share the same content. So here in my network, on the left, 6, 5, and 4 share the same content, but also 6 share the same content as 3. And my point is that if you build this network as described, many of those edges, they will appear, but they are not related to coordination. Why? Because of two properties of the web. The distribution of content popularity is heavily skewed. Some contents are very, 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 very popular. Others are very rarely shared. So chances are that two people will share the same content without coordination, multiple times, just because they stumble upon the same content that is very, very popular. So I share news X, and she shares the same news. Even though I've never seen her before, we share the same content. We didn't coordinate, okay? Another property of the web is the skewness in the distribution of user activity level. Some users share much more than others. It's a distribution that is called power law. Some users share a lot. So chances are that two users who share a lot, they will share the same content. And there will be an edge between them. And you might think, but these edges are rare. They are not. If you build this network for like a week, you will see many edges that are very heavy. The weight here is the number of times that those two users share the same content. And it might be pure chance. It might be random behavior. And because they occur in large scale, there are many, many of them, you cannot see really those edges that might or may be related to coordination. I will never be able to say for sure that they are coordinating, right? Because this is something that takes place in the real world. I only have the trace, the digital trace. So I wanted to be conservative here. I want to look at those edges that most probably with some probability, there is a hypothesis test here, it should be coordination. The chance that it's not coordination is too small. That's what I want to do. I want to get rid of anything that I'm not sure about. And one strategy would be to remove the edges that have smallest weights. This doesn't work completely because we know that especially coordination for evil things, they exchange accounts every now and then. So we see different nodes. Each node here is a user ID. We see different nodes with edges that are not very heavy, and they still could be participating in the coordination. So we need something more, you need something smarter than that, okay? And the challenge here in the coordination is to try to have like a network like this with hundreds of thousands of edges and come up with a subset of the edges for which I have stronger evidence or a higher chance that that's for sure, that's coordination, never for sure, but that's probably coordination. This is something that it's called network backbone extraction or data sparsification in network sparsification. There is a large body of work on that, but when we started working on it, there was very few unified strategy to choose a backbone extraction method for a particular case study. So we try to study the methods. There are methods that are global, like take the heaviest edges. That's a global approach. But others are local. Look at the edge, look at the nodes that this edge connect, the users this edge connect, and make a decision based on local patterns. Some are structured, others are probabilistic. And what we did was to try to propose a methodology to choose a backbone extraction method for a given phenomena. And that's what we did in different contexts of coordination. I'm going to show some examples now. We did for WhatsApp during the 2018 Brazilian elections. We did also for Twitter on the 2020 US elections. And we did for Telegram on the last Brazilian election. I'm going to show results of 2 of these case studies. So we start talking about, start studying WhatsApp. WhatsApp was always very big in Brazil, major means of communication and exchange of information in Brazil. And we wanted to understand how information spread in WhatsApp. Back then, WhatsApp had a limit of 256 users per group, and yet we could see pieces of information or pieces of content that would be replicated thousands of times. So how could that be? Just pure chance? No, well, we didn't know. We started looking for possible channels, implicit channels, through which the information would flow from one group to another group. Implicit because unlike Twitter/X, Facebook, there is no clear link between users. There is a group and a bunch of people talking. There's no link to build a network. So we had to try to infer an implicit network. And one of the networks that we built, we called the media-centric network, which was this idea that I connect users who share the same content, regardless of which group. And our goal here was try to identify communities of users in the sense of graph. If anyone works with a network graph, you have community detection. So we wanted to run community detection on these networks and try to identify groups of users. Because in this network, I connect users who share the same content, these groups would suggest groups of users who were promoting the same content, possibly coordination. And here we use data from public WhatsApp groups during the 2018 Brazilian election. And what we found is that it's a very noisy network. This is a sample of the network only, and each color here is a different community. There's no community structure. You would expect some groups very clear, separated, and we don't see. The community structure is very weak. Why? Because there are many edges here that are noisy. And so we wanted to get rid of them. We wanted to focus on what we call the salient edges, which should reflect persistent and repetitive behavior out of pattern. We needed a backbone extraction method here. And this is just to illustrate the importance of choosing a good method to extract the backbone. So this is the original network. And each one of those here is a backbone extracted by different methods. So in some cases, I see no structure at all in the backbone, because this method here has nothing to do with coordination, so you shouldn't use it. In this case, we found that a good approach was something called disparity filter. The idea of the disparity filter is the following. It's a local method. I look at each edge. I have an edge between user X or ID X. I don't have users, I always have anonymous IDs. ID X and ID Y. And this edge is weighted by the number of times that these two IDs, these two accounts, share the same content. The decision on whether this edge has probably reflect coordination is based on a reference model that is built for each of the two nodes. The idea is that if user X, ID X, is behaving randomly without coordination, the distribution of edge weights, in the edges that connect to it should be roughly uniform. There should be nothing that stands out as very large. Any edge that deviates from this assumption, so it's a hypothesis test here, there is a p-value in the background. These are edges that I should keep, and they reflect possibly coordination. So I can control how aggressive I am or how conservative I am by controlling the hypothesis test that I have here. And in our experiments, we were very aggressive in the sense of if I was not very sure, if the probability of deviation here was not very high, I wouldn't keep it. I would think that it might be random behavior. I would only keep those that have like a p-value very, 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 very tiny, meaning that the chances are big that this is actually coordination. That's the idea, okay? And when we did that, then we found the communities. We found a much better community structure. And then the question is, given that now I have the community, the backbone and the communities, where in this network are the users who more often share fake news, misinformation? This was the topic that we were interested back then. And we looked at the network and we asked ourselves the following. Look at the backbone that you extracted that most probably relates to coordination, and look at the rest, everything that you removed because you're not sure. That's what we call periphery. In the backbone is what I'm betting that it's coordination. In the periphery, it's something that I don't have evidence enough for that. So I claim that it's just an isolation, just by chance. And what do we see? What comes from the backbone? The backbone has 16% of the nodes, 4% of the edges, 16% of the IDs that were in this sample that we analyzed, and 4% of the interactions. Yet, from 60 to 100% of the users, the top users who share misinformation, those who shared more misinformation, they are here. So they are indeed coordinating. However, these users reflect a minority of everyone involved in sharing misinformation. A lot of the misinformation comes from the periphery, unfortunately. Up to 53% of the messages with misinformation come from here, so a large fraction of it, as said, comes from the periphery. Yet, these guys here in the backbone are those who more often introduce fake news in the system that we analyze. So it would be something like this. I have this score, red here, of users who share the same content over and over again, very often introduce fake content in the system. However, I have this huge periphery of people for whom I don't have enough evidence to claim any coordination. And yet, because they are massive in terms of number of ideas, numbers of people eventually, they represent a large fraction of the messages. So this is bad. This is bad because the question that comes up for me is always, what can we do about that? And honestly, I think this thing about fake news and related phenomena is a very hard problem because of asymmetry. It's very easy to generate. It's very quick to evolve. It's hard to identify and increasingly harder. And yet, it's the debunking, which is when you prove that the fake news is actually not fake, it really doesn't undo all the harm. I mean, a very short period of time that the message with fake content is in the system, the damage is quite big. So debunking doesn't fix that. So it's really hard. And to say that I really don't believe in solutions that are only technical. I think we need something that also involves the social aspect. And I'm much more hopeful when I see efforts like this one, which is media literacy. Because it doesn't matter, even if you go behind, if you chase the core, those bad guys, the massive amount of people in the periphery, they contribute a lot to the process. So you're not going to stop it. So it's just my answer to this problem. I really don't think of any solution that it's only technical. But looking beyond fake news, we like this idea of exploring coordination in other contexts. And we looked at into two different contexts, 2 elections. And now I'm going to talk about the last Brazilian election, 2022. Quick history for those who are not from Brazil, I don't know. At that time, we had a far-right president who was trying re-election. And he, in 2021, 2020, something like that, he publicly said that he was leaving WhatsApp, which was a main platform for communication, to go to Telegram. He opened a channel there, and very quickly this channel exploded with 1 million followers because his followers went up there. And because of our experience with collecting WhatsApp during the 2018 election, we wanted to do a similar analysis in the 2022 election. But then we looked into Telegram because of that. This is a very polarized election, very conflictuous. Our system, we have 2 rounds. In the first round, if the candidate that gets the largest number of votes gets more than 50, he's elected. This was not the case. So we had a second round where when the 2 best-ranked candidates fought against each other. And we had another candidate outvoting Bolsonaro, which was a left-wing candidate. So we had a far-right and left-wing. And it was a close call, 52 against 48%. And it was very conflictuous. We were expecting something very bad to happen, perhaps not what exactly happened, but the president took office, and it was beautiful for those watching because it was peaceful. And then 7 days later, exactly 7 days later, a massive amount of people invaded Brasilia and destroyed the buildings of the 3 powers. And we were gathering the data. I mean, we didn't expect that, right? We were just we're trying to study fake news still. And, but we were collecting data from Telegram. And we didn't focus our data on Bolsonaro supporters. We covered the whole spectrum of the political ideology in Brazil. But then we had the opportunity to try to understand to which extent Telegram was used to coordinate this event, the riots in Brasilia. And that's a paper that came out last year, where we looked into public, politically oriented Telegram groups during the election, during the 2 rounds, and during the riots in Brasilia in January 8th. And here we also looked into backbone extraction, but here we also looked into content, NLP techniques, natural language processing techniques, and I'm going to show one result which is about topic modeling to help understand the narratives in this group and how they relate to the phenomenon, which is the riots, which is the riots in Brasilia in January 8th. So here we experimented with 2 backbone extraction methods. Very quickly, I had again disparate filter, and I had another method which we call DF disparate filter, DF plus NB, neighborhood overlap, which is a more conservative technique. If disparate filter reviews the core of the coordination, disparate filter plus neighborhood overlap reviews the core of the core. It's like a hierarchical strategy. And what did we see? So I'm going to show a very big table, but I'm going to highlight certain things here, right? So I have results for the first round of the election, the second round of the election, and the riots. And I have the complete network. I have disparate filter, the first backbone, and I had the more restrictive backbone method, which is disparate filter plus neighborhood overlap, NB. What do we see? So what we see here in the right, it's this metric here is called modularity. It's a metric of, to characterize a network property. It has to do with how good the community structure is. The larger the modularity, the more clear the communities are. So here we see a great increase when we focus on those edges that most probably reflect coordination. So you see they are very tightly connected. A modularity goes from as high as 1. So a 0.6 to 1 is something that it's a tightly connected group of users. Small group of users like this here, but still tightly connected. And if you look over time, this organization, community organization, increases even further, becomes even stronger. So what do we have? We have a small fraction of users, accounts, 9%, 2%, but they are responsible for a large fraction of messages. 9% of the users, 61% of the messages being shared in the groups. These messages received a lot of views. 78% of the views in the system during the time were for these messages. And these users who are in the core, they often introduce new content, just like we saw in WhatsApp. And what's this message? The message shared. So this is one of the results that we had for the content analysis. This is topic modeling. And what we show here are the top topics that we identify in the messages being shared by those users. So you see here the number 1 with 38,000 messages, 420 million views. It's about military intervention. And another one here, the organization of the rallies in Brasilia. And if we look at how these topics evolve over time, we see clearly how the network, meaning the groups in WhatsApp, organized around these topics. I'm not showing these results here because of time, but this is just to illustrate how we can understand the phenomenon by combining signals from the network structure, but also from content analysis. Well, now I'm going to shift, and I have a couple of minutes just to finish, to discuss something that we started very recently, very, very recently, but that I find very relevant, so that's what I'm bringing here today, which is harms, dangers for kids online. And the driving question here is how can we protect kids in social media platforms? Sometimes when I ask this question, I get the answer. You have parental control techniques. They don't work. Just check. They don't work because kids, especially teenagers, are very smart. So just check the stats. The stats are very, very bad in terms of the percentage of kids online, the amount of time kids are online, and their ages. We see an increasing fraction of children as young as 8-year-olds spending hours online. I'm going to show here is some very initial results revealing evidence of potential harms. There are different works in the literature about trying to uncover evidence of exposure of kids to age-inappropriate content. Most of them are focused on YouTube. And they showed evidence of content that is, kids being exposed to content that is not appropriate. And this is also for, they have shown that also for YouTube Kids, which is also something that people tell me, but you have YouTube Kids. YouTube Kids is not completely safe either. Here, we looked at a different platform. It's called Twitch. Twitch is a live streaming platform that is very popular among the youth, especially, and also kids and teenagers, because it's very popular among gamers. Gamers go there to play the games and stream while they're playing. And people watch. I'm not very sure why, but they do. And they find very interesting because it's very, very, very popular. And Twitch is an interesting case because it does have some features that should protect kids. For instance, they require a minimum age for an account, as many as most of the social media platforms do, which is 13. However, age verification is not performed. You could say that you are 17 and that's it. So, another thing that Twitch has is the CCLs, which is content classification labels. The streamer can choose to flag a content as containing some sensitive content, okay? For instance, violence, there are different CCLs. However, the platform leaves to the streamer the decision of flagging or not the stream with that. Another thing is the rating of the game. Whenever the streamer is streaming a game, it allows the streamer to flag the ratings, like PG-13 or whatever. And this is something that the platform, whenever it's a mature game for 17 or older, the platform puts that automatically, and I'm going to show you. So it labels automatically. This is a stream of a mature game. And also, there is a flag for branded content, advertisement, which for in some countries like Brazil, it's a critical point because we have legislation, or we have regulations, better saying, to control the access of kids to propaganda. So this is just an example of a screen of Twitch. And what did we do? Okay, so we used the API of the platform to collect streams that had words, tags, referring to, we had like this dictionary of tags related to kids. For instance, the word kid, family, safe for kids, kid gamers, there are a bunch of words that we use that as proxy or as a signal that if the stream has this word as a tag, this stream should be safe for a child or a children or a teenager. That's what we used. And here's an example of a stream that had kid as a tag. But it has paid promotion, which is propaganda, and it is a mature rated game, something that is for appropriate only for 17 or older. Okay. This is just to give an example. So what we did was this. We gathered streams with tags related to kids, and we looked at the metadata. And what did we see? So if we looked at the top 10 games that were streamed, here I have what is red are games that had the adult classification, mature game. And what's blue, it's something without this rating, or so it should be considered free for any age. And here are the tags that we used. So safe space, family friendly, kids, kid friendly. This is the very basic thing that we used. And in all cases, we had streams for the top 10 games. We had games that had adult classification with tags that were related to kids. If you look at the CCLs, we see streams with kids, family friendly, but also flagged with violent and graphics depictions or profanity and vulgarity. And if I looked at branded content, a large fraction of the streams had some sort of advertisement or promotion being associated with it. So this is some initial evidence of the potential exposure of kids to content that is not appropriate for them. What we did more recently, this is a paper that is still under review, but I like to talk to it because it's a different strategy to collect data. Here is an active data collection. We use the persona, which is an account, a registered account with an age, fake. Okay? So I had a persona or an account based in Brazil or in the US, we experiment with both, with different ages. We tried 13, 15, 18. So these are registered users with the age disclosed to the platform. So the platform could do something in the sense that it has the information about the user. What do we see in this case? So this is a word cloud of the words, most important keywords in the stream titles of streams that our 13-year-old from the US persona was exposed to. So we see a lot of reference to drops, which is a virtual reward system of the platform, that if you watch more, you get more drops. And you also see reference, simplifying, but that's basically it. And you also see reference to other platforms. So this is like incentivizing prolonged exposure in the platform or in other platform. But perhaps even more striking is the large frequency of references to merchandise and to donation, because you can donate money. For those from Brazil, in the Brazilian 13 persona, we saw lots of references to Pix. Pix is an instant payment system that we have, very easy to get access to. And our 13-year-old persona from Brazil saw lots of streams with Pix, 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 Pix. If we look at the emojis, then we see each column here is a different persona. US, Brazil, 13, 15, 18. And we see here some striking cases of no one under 18 in streams that were shown to our Brazilian 13 and Brazilian 15. So this is clearly inappropriate. But we see a few others that for me, before starting working with that, was really very harmless. Very, very, very harmless, nothing special, until I hit this, which then I learned that many of these very harmless, apparently harmless emojis are very commonly used among teens in reference to sexting and sexualized content. Okay. Then we looked at the messages in the chat. I didn't say that, but the Twitch has a chat. Besides the live stream, it has a chat. And then while our persona was watching the stream, we looked at which messages would pop up in the chat. And we analyzed these messages. And we run a toxicity model called Detoxify. And we found that only 5% of the messages were toxic. This could seem small, but the type of content that this message carried was really, really scary. So we had lots of profanity, vulgarity, personal insults, sexualized and objectifying language, and very aggressive towards specific people, specific subgroups, in general, everything. So, in summary, I try to talk a little bit about our effort to characterize and model user behavior, to try to understand drivers, but also dangers in the dissemination of social media. The methodological challenges that I hope that I made clear is that we have to deal with a lot of heterogeneity, a lot of complexity, noisy and irrelevant data, how to get rid of what doesn't matter and what pollutes your analysis. In the case of collective behavior, this idea of combining structure network with semantic signals from the content, I think it's really, really interesting. And this topic of kids online, which I find very, very challenging and complex because, again, it's not only technical. As next steps, I really think that no single analysis is solid if you don't think of all the components, like individual level, social level, and the semantics of the content. So I like to think of methodologies that bring those multiple perspectives to the study. And there are other fronts that should be explored, like dynamics, cross-platform, and especially dangers beyond the political sphere, because in the political sphere, we already have lots of dangers, so we should look beyond that. Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Jussara. Very, very interesting talk. We have time for questions. Questions, anyone? Yes? Over there. Switch it on, I think.
Hello, thank you for the talk, and I think it's very exciting, the kind of work that you're doing. I just want to connect with you on the keeping children safe online, and also want to ask basically, in some countries like Australia, they're looking to ban social media. So what would be your opinion in terms of addressing this problem? Is doing a ban a good solution to this problem, or should we look at, because the kind of things you showed in your analysis, it's quite dangerous, I believe. And also going forward, what are your plans to take this keeping children safe online work? Thank
We're
you.
just starting, as I said. We just got a paper earlier this year. Usually I am against banning things. I don't think we should, because I don't think it's going to be really effective. I think teenagers are very smart. I trust more in approaches that they have like a child-centered moderation. There are some papers that talk about like engaging the children, engaging the user, the youth, into the moderation. So it's more, again, an education effort than anything else. Yeah. But when we saw these last results, it's really scary. But I tend to be against banning because I just don't think they are effective.
Other questions? Okay. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for this very inspiring talk. It was wonderful to hear. It was very appreciated. You keep my attention from in the yeah, exactly. This was great. I have a question because I'm working on more on visualization, information visualization. I see a lot of networks and I saw a sort of graphs. I would like to know if you have been working or using other kind of visualization techniques like parallel coordinates that could express and provide other types of correlations that could demonstrate your points, because I see maybe it was a choice. I was wondering, maybe it was a choice because the time for doing the presentation. So,
no, it's. I got the same question from a visualization person a couple of weeks ago. It's really a lack of proper knowledge on techniques of visualization that should be used. So I would love to improve that with better visualization techniques. Yeah. But it's more appealing, and I understand, I totally understand. It's really lack of knowledge and skill in this area.
So if there are no further questions, we can thank Jussara again.
Thank you.
Para tirar foto. O que vocês duas? Yes. That's the beginning.